I never know when this goes live, but I think it's three,
It's live.
2. It's live. So roll the footage. Welcome back, everybody, to the Strategy Show. I'm your host, Simon Severino. Today, my guest, after 20 years of digital marketing experience with Fortune 500s like IBM and Nokia, he has started the Visual Storytelling Institute to address the overload of information and the decrease of attention that goes on at the same time. Welcome, everybody. Shlomi Ron.
Thank you, Simon. It's really great to be here.
So cool to have you here because this is so relevant and everybody can relate, right? The information's going up, attention is going down.
Yeah.
So really excited to go through this with you. And you have brought some super cool CEO tips around why nobody cares about your features, why you should lead with emotion first, and why you should mirror the customer.
Yep.
But first, what are you currently creating?
Yeah, so I'm currently, first of all, Visual Storytelling Institute is really the primary think tank that really focus on bringing the gospel of visual storytelling from the world of art, entertainment, what Hollywood has been doing for eons, to the world of marketing. So my unique niche is visual storytelling in the context of marketing. So I provide services such as training workshops for corporate clients, and also I work with universities. I teach a brand storytelling course here in Miami at the business school, which is a lot of fun. I'm also providing production services. Sometimes I have clients that are looking for a polished visual story, like a presentation or videos, branded documentaries. So that's on the production side. I'm doing some consulting work. And right now, I'm actually working on developing my own online course, because I'm getting a lot of requests from people about entry-level visual storytelling. Give me the basics. So that's pretty much it.
Powerful. And why does nobody care about your features?
Yeah, so the old way used to be called the interruption marketing, where brands would interrupt their customers with ads, and they're strictly focused on their product features, buy now, and nobody cared. We're entering a new era where customers are really fed up with the salesy messages, and now the focus has shifted towards putting the customer as the hero of the story. It's not about the brand; the customer is the hero, and you better focus on the problem that the customer is trying to solve instead of focusing on your product features, because nobody cares initially about your product features.
Yep. Absolutely. We are all getting so many interrupting signals, and it's always like, come on, cancel.
Exactly.
So before we go to your second CEO tip, which is why we should lead with emotion first, I am curious who you nominate for the award. You can only pick one person who, when everybody zigs, this person is zagging. But from your perspective, this person is doing the right things. Who is this person?
Yeah, so I've recently had the great pleasure to, on my podcast, The Visual Storytelling Today, to interview Nina Jacobson, and she's the CEO of Bytes.com. And she's, as exactly what she said, when people are zigging, she's zagging. So she's focusing on long-form visual stories, basically branded video stories. So she created a website that pretty much operates like a Netflix, but for branded stories, long-form branded stories. And especially when people say, that attention span is short and people are overwhelmed with information. So the kind of running logic is that you should focus on shorter videos. So she's doing the opposite. She's working with major brands to introduce long-form videos because she believes that it gives brands more time to connect emotionally with audiences when you have a longer video, which I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and it's so counter trend. I love it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because today in our team meeting at Strategy Sprints, we discussed going also in the other direction, because we had one consultant and he told us, he was here on the show and he said, you have to go daily out there, Simon, and the attention span is 10 to 12 minutes. And the
Right.
algorithm wants you to have 10 to 12 minutes. So we did it now for 4 months, daily 10 to 12 minutes. And now today in the meeting, we said, this is not us. So, okay, whatever the algorithm might want is good for the algorithm, but we don't care about the algorithm. We care about the message and what we want to convey and who we are. So we will go back to 45 minutes, 50 minutes, because that's more of our natural flow.
Absolutely. Yeah, check out that latest interview I did. It's on my website under the podcast, how to create long-form visual stories. And I think it's a great eye-opener for a lot of marketers out there that you should definitely consider. I'm not saying short form is not effective, if you are doing short sales pitches or event announcements, but if you really want to connect emotionally with the audience, it can work very well, both at the top level of your funnel, the awareness stage, but also in the middle when you want to really get very deep information.
Absolutely. So I guess the only one bottleneck that is with long form is, will people really watch to the end? But I guess this is where your superpower comes in, because you say, well, that's the craft.
Storytelling.
Storyteller, you will hold their attention.
Exactly. And typically another point about long form is that it doesn't feel like an ad. It feels like a short film that you're actually watching on Netflix. So the brand presence is really very implicit. It's really more about the story that bring to life, the larger brand narrative of the brand. So, and that's how you can actually communicate better, because it's not in your face. It's actually through a storytelling that kind of show versus telling you the essence of what the brand is all about.
And I guess right now the audience is super curious to get like a basic introduction to how to hold the attention of people over many minutes. So
So I would say that brings us to the tip number 2, and especially where you are at the awareness stage, where you are dealing with strangers, people who never heard about you before. It could be in the form of maybe a explainer video on your homepage, or maybe it's you're doing a presentation online or in person. One thing a lot of people don't know is that our brain first process first impression information through the emotional brain, not through the logical. So we really look for details in the information you are communicating that can actually make sense to our world. And the way we make sense of it is by looking back at our bag of past experiences. And we typically tend to remember memorable events that carry high emotional load, could be negative or positive. But so when you actually present or communicate for the first time to someone, it's really important to start with the emotional content first, because once you got them emotionally, then it's much easier for them to process your logical feature benefits. Give me now that I'm really excited about your backstory. It actually happened to me, last year. I can really relate to this story that you started with. Okay, now I can really believe you more about, the value of your product. And now we can go down to the nitty gritty, but start with a really great emotional impact, and then switch deeper to the other areas of your topic.
Strong emotions first, and then the logical part. Cool.
Yep.
What is maybe one book that inspired you recently?
Yeah, so on the business category, I should say, the Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall. It's a really must-have, must-read book. Really states the value of storytelling. The other one is called Story by Robert McKee, and he's really one of the most important storytelling experts from Hollywood. So if you are really want to get into the craft of storytelling, but take it from the, really the pros in Hollywood, because he's talking a lot about scripting and giving tons of examples of the major films. it's a great way for you to think like a filmmaker as you're creating branded stories for your audience. So those two I would start with.
Hey, should I read the book? Because I have just started writing my first book, so I have my first chapter.
There you
And
go.
I want it to be 12 very good emotional chapters, but I'm
Yeah,
not a writer yet.
yeah.
So should I read this book and learn like actually how to create that structure?
Yeah, I think these are really great books for you to kind of start thinking about story structure and characters and high stakes. He's talking about all these elements in this book, Robert McKee. And Jonathan Gottschall is also covering this, but from a broader perspective, more kind of connected to the business world. So I actually published a book myself a few months ago. It's called Total Acuity. And unlike other business books that kind of go the typical format of interviewing experts with stats, mine is actually a collection of short stories, things that happen to me in real life, but they carry a visual storytelling principle.
Oh,
Yeah.
and how did you do that? So are they standalone stories or are they connected?
They are standalone stories, and they actually stand for my weekly newsletter. So every week I email to my mailing list. So sometimes, occasionally, I would write a short story to kind of bring up an important visual storytelling principle. And over time, I collected lots of short stories like that. So I figured, why not collect them into a book? And the big message of this book is that, you know, in order to connect with the audience, you really need to come up with meaningful details, details that are really meaningful to your audience, because that's how they can relate. If they have the same experiences in their life, chances they're going to, react to your message. So those stories are all about creating those bridges of empathy to my audience through things that they might have already experienced in their life, because these are really ordinary stories that happened to me, but I use them as springboards to bring up important marketing principles.
And when you say each chapter has visual storytelling, do you mean actual graphics or metaphors or
So
something
it's
else?
actually it's both. So it's both a short story, a text-based, something that happened to me, and I also support it with the visual that actually bring up a visual storytelling principle in visual, like an image. And the images are coming for the most part from my Instagram account over time, and the stories came from my newsletter. So this is just kind of a great advice for everybody that's listening or watching, is that definitely start developing content on a regular basis. You can never know how, at some point you have such a great accumulation of content that you can turn into a book, ebooks, a variety of, containers that people can enjoy.
And one question that I currently ask everybody, should people then, when they put together their newsletter, their blogs, should
Yep.
they go self-published or go for a big publisher?
I would say, right now the self-publishing route is much easier. I did mine on Amazon, and it was really fairly easy. And for example, I found my book cover designer on Instagram, of all places, and she did a tremendous work. We came up, my vision was to create like a medieval kind of design that combined past and present with technological elements. So it's kind of a interesting interplay, and she did it beautifully. I mean, so I would go with self-publishing, because you're going to have more control on the finished product. And also, the traditional publishing world is much more gated. It's going to take you a while to break through, and I would just go and just do your thing independently.
Strong. And you have also a third CEO tip for us about mirroring the customer.
Yeah, so the mirroring element, it's a constant theme of VSI. You can even go on my homepage. You'll see I'm using a mirroring water as a kind of reflection, and it's coming from actually scientific evidence of Uri Hasson is a Princeton University researcher that found that we all carry mirroring neurons. So when I tell a story, our wavelengths right now should be mirroring each other if you are really absorbing what I'm telling you. So I kind of took it to a very simple principle by saying that you really need to, every engagement, in order for you to connect with your audience, the magic really happens when your brand story is really mirroring the personal story of your customer. So what does it really mean? It really means that you need to find that sweet spot between what you want and what your customer wants. To do that, you need to do a really very thorough research to get into their world, understand, their passion, interest, how they describe your problem. That's important too as well, because if you can use the language that your customer is using to describe the problem in your story, it's going to reflect back. They can say, hey, this is my story. This is, you talk in my language. This is really my pain. I've been complaining and, talking about it for so long, you really get, my pain. So that mirroring effect is super important for connection. But to really make it work, you really need to do like a pre-research and just to get the gist of the inner world of your customer.
Were there any books or movies or whatever artifacts that you saw recently where you said, oh, this is exactly great storytelling?
Yeah, I think, well, part of my reason why I started the Visual Storytelling Institute is because all along in my career, I was nursing my side passion for visual stories, and it kind of led itself, one of them, into classic Italian cinema. So I'm a great fan of, the films black and white from the 50s and 60s.
Neorealismo.
So, exactly. So one of my favorite filmmakers is Ermanno Olmi, Il Posto, The Job, and did his first film. He was hired by Edison, the electricity company in Italy, and he actually started their own film department there. So with no experience whatsoever, he started by scratch. His mother actually arranged him the position. And over one weekend, he brought his friends and shot this first film, Il Posto, the position or the job, in 1961. And I thought this film is so powerful just because Olmi is a great master of also projecting emotions using facial expressions. So one of his great beliefs is that sometimes if something is radical is happening in the background, it's better to focus the camera not on the source of the action, but on the facial expressions of the people around it. Because the facial expression of the people around it responding to that conflict in the background is much more telling and much more powerful than just showing, what happened. And I thought this is a great way. And that film in particular is actually doing an amazing job in kind of analyzing emotional and body language of the characters in response to things that are happening around them. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm thinking of, once I had a client and they asked me, hey, I don't know exactly how to pick the next head of sales and what should be the criteria. And I was like, I really don't know. I see many great salespeople, but there is not one set of criteria that you can go from Sydney to San Diego. These are the 5 things that you should look at. So I said, what about we do it in a theater and you don't look at that person, but you took the camera in the other direction and you look at the faces of the audience.
Yeah, there you go. You see, I mean, it's much more interesting. It really gives it actually puts the audience at the same position of the audience on the film, right? Because the audience in the film that's reacting to the source of action is actually at the same position as the audience in the room. So it's kind of interesting to see that effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the first time that somebody mentions neorealism on the show. Thank you for that.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I've been blogging about classic Italian cinema for over 10 years. So if you want to look at my film reviews, it's on cafepellicola.com.
Cafepellicola.com. Let's
Yeah.
write it here.
Yeah.
Cafepellicola.com.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Great. Is there one thing that I forgot to ask you?
I think you covered a lot information. I would say if you're just starting with visual storytelling, we can check out. Right now, we are currently dominating the search engines on visual storytelling. You're gonna search and find one of my early articles, "What is visual storytelling?" And it's really gives you the gist of this new discipline. It's kind of the next generation marketing. And just to keep everybody on the same page, I came up with a definition, which is any marketing strategy that you do that has three conditions. The first one is that you actually use the 3-act story structure. Not a lot of people realize that, setting, conflict resolution. 2, that you put your customer as the hero of the story. So it's not about you as the brand. The brand is just the guide or mentor along the way. And 3 is that you use visual format to communicate your story through. And that could be images, videos, infographics. And the reason for that is because when you combine visual and storytelling, you actually created a powerful Trojan horse to cut through the clutter, because by nature, we are wired to process visual information 60,000 times faster than what we hear or read. And also, latest studies talk about 9 out of 10 people prefer to consume information packaged as stories versus facts and stats. Again, because of the personal, the emotional level that they can get out of it. So think about it. Again, the basic advice I would say, be yourself when you tell stories. And that's the best approach to kind of bring out your identity, your humanity. And don't really try to kind of make things too beautiful and polished. It's okay if there's hiccups or you show some imperfections. That's even better.
Because that creates that emotional bridge and that resonance and the detail that you were talking.
Exactly. Because emotions in my book work like hashtags. Think about it. Emotions are like hashtags. You remember events from your past because of the emotional levels that are attached to them. Think about it. Things that make you happy, made you sad, you remember more than, if it was just another day, regular day in your life, right? So those emotions works like hashtag. That's how you remember things. And again, that brings us to my first point, why it's important to start with emotions, because people are going to do the same exercise like you. The reason you're telling the story because of the emotion that you felt might be resonating with their life experiences that carry the same emotion.
So powerful. Thank you so much, Shlomi. Who should be my next guest?
So I was thinking, just because you asked me what something has changed my mind recently. So, for a long time, I was thinking short stories are the best. Now I'm convinced, you got to mix it with long form. So I would definitely recommend Nina Jacobson, again, CEO of Bytes.com. It's a Copenhagen-based company. And, she's great in kind of shedding light on this new category of long branded stories and why you should consider them and what are the benefits. And it's kind of a great way to kind of shatter another misconception in the marketplace.
Thank you so much. And it's so important when everybody seeks to zag also and to keep thinking on our own feet. And not every trend is the right thing to do. Thank you so much, Shlomi, for being here. Come back soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.